It is lights out and away we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Hard or Soft F1 podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Huff, joined as always by my Canadian co-host, RJ McCullough. What's up, RJ?
Hello there. Hey, buddy. Yeah, I guess we'll just get right to it because this isn't a happy day for me. But since it is your team, I'll just let you take away the first topic because
Yes.
this was about as predictable as you drafting a terrible team in our fantasy league.
Yeah, I highly suggest, if you're interested, go back and watch the draft episode from the start of the 2023 season because, like George Russell in Singapore, I bottled it. So, but yes, as of the Suzuka GP, Red Bull Racing are champions, constructor champions. Max Verstappen is not yet a champion. We'll get to that a little bit later. But with 623 points, Red Bull have secured the championship title, the WCC. Yes, the WCC, not the WDC. 400 of those points, by the way, are from Max Verstappen. A nice, crisp 400 even points. But I also can't disrespect Sergio too much while he's had quite a stinker of a season, especially in the latter half. He's contributed 223 points, and he is second in the championship. So, I mean, while compared to Max, may not seem like that big of an accomplishment. While I rag on Sergio quite a bit, I mean it's commendable, at least so far. He's then again, Max could probably win the constructor title on his own by the end of the season. That's going to be an interesting stat we can look at, but yeah, it's insane the level of dominance that Red Bull have had this season, and I know everybody was hoping that Singapore was going to be a little bit of a shift change, which it kind of was, but yeah, they came back. Max came back very, very strong in Japan. Checo did not. He had a very rough race.
My dog could have put up 223 points in that car. While we're on the topic of Checo driving like an absolute maniac, not only did he kind of interfere with 3 different drivers' races and received penalties for them. So there's 2 races in a row now. He's just driving like an absolute madman out there.
Yes.
But this time, him and Red Bull have exploited a rule that really, really could be dangerous. So essentially, after they decided just to bring him in and retire the car because he was doing so shit and he had got so much damage from crashing everyone and trying to crash everyone out of the race. I think he was in the pits for about 7 or 8 laps. He took a dump, had a pee, called his kids, ate some ice cream, hopped back in the car, and then went back out on track for, 2 laps, 1 lap, just to serve his 5-second penalty so he didn't have to serve it at the next race. Now, yeah, that was kind of a smart move on Red Bull's behalf to exploit the loophole, and they're saying they're going to change the rule. But the rule they say they're going to change is that you can't, get rid of your penalty. They're not changing the rule, as far as I know, that you can't go back out on track. So what's stopping Mercedes if George wouldn't do that. But let's just say, what's stopping from Mercedes if Lewis is in second and George DNFs and is sitting in the pits and Max is up by 30 seconds? What's stopping George from coming back out from the pits and accidentally taking Max out of the race?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely opens up a lot of really ugly possibilities. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think it's a little ridiculous and makes no sense. I mean, obviously, they found I feel like Red Bull has people on staff that are specifically looking for loopholes in the rule book for them to break. But it's like twice in a row now, the FIA have clarified that, hey, it's okay that we allowed Red Bull to do this on this weekend, but we're going to be very, very strict if anyone else does it going forward, which, I mean, as a Max fan, it's ridiculous. I can't justify that in any way. So I don't know. Yeah, like you said, other teams could, I mean, I'm for sure, that would cause a lot of backlash doing something like that. But the fact that that's even like open in the rule book is extremely ridiculous. You see in that graph that he was like, what, 14 or 15 laps down or something like that, like something absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, Checo's had, especially in Japan. I mean, Singapore was also terrible, but he's ruined multiple drivers' races. He's caused damage to multiple drivers, and he's not accomplished anything himself. So while I was giving him some praises for this season, you're right. I mean, it's been especially of late, just absolutely terrible. And I mean, it feels like his qualifying bad luck has just transferred into the races now as well. I mean, he was not the street race king by any means.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the pictures of the podiums from the last however many races, like, yeah, the constant is Max standing in the middle, aside from one picture. But like on the other side of Max is just a total array of drivers. It hasn't been Perez very often since like the middle of the season. But yeah, he was being a dink, but I guess that's kind of par for the course at this point. We'll get a little bit more maybe into why in a little bit, but for now, there's a couple other teams that had some drama. I'm obviously going to take Mercedes. So what was going on with Alpine? Because, I mean, Gasly tried to destroy his entire car when he pulled into the pits after the race.
Yeah, it wasn't bad enough that Oscar Piastri was on the podium. Alpine just had to get themselves in some more shit this weekend. So, yeah, I think even on the main broadcast, if I'm not mistaken, I remember seeing Gasly's reaction, and he was obviously, hitting the car and, flipped the bird or whatever. So, basically what happened is on the last corner of the last lap, he let Ocon through, who was right behind him, which just at a glance would seem ridiculous. But Ocon sort of tried to explain it. He gave specific examples of when he had done it in the past for his previous teammates, Daniel, Nico. It's sort of, if the driver like Ocon took the undercut to benefit Gasly, and if they do that, then if they're in the position that they are at the end of the race where they're kind of double stacked against each other, then they'll swap the drivers. Apparently, that's like a team rule at Alpine. I think I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that rule? Because to me, that just seems kind of pointless.
Yeah, well, I guess they're saying, like, if Gasly's 10th and Ocon's 9th, and Ocon lets Gasly go ahead to 9th, the rule is if Gasly can't get 8th, like if he can't catch the car ahead, then he has to swap back so they finish 10th, 9th.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, in theory, I guess like it's a fair rule, but considering the way Gasly reacted, I don't know that he was aware of it, or like obviously he's new to the team this year, whereas Ocon's been there for a few years. So like maybe it's just he hasn't gone through it the other way yet. I don't know, but he looked pretty pissed. So I don't know, maybe there was more to it. In general, it seems like a fair rule. I'm just trying to think like if that happened to Lewis, what I would think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if putting biases aside, like because obviously I like Gasly more than Ocon, but putting biases aside, I do think it's a fair rule. It just comes down to that point, communication, because obviously Gasly wasn't aware or forgot or something. And what was it for? I think it was for 10th and 9th. So it's really 1 point that they're squabbling over. But
yeah,
at that level, it could make a difference. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think like put it this way? I guess. Do you think Max would let Sergio back through on the last lap?
No, I definitely think that's a Alpine rule. I don't know if a lot of other teams adopt that. If they do, I don't think it's like something or a situation where they're like, okay, in every single situation or instance that this happens, we're gonna swap the drivers. Like, I don't know. I mean, I get it. It's in an effort to be fair, but I get Gasly being pissed. I mean, but it also I feel like it takes a lot of, I don't even know the right word, but like I guess a lot of mental strength to be able to do that, to be willing to just let that person drive past you right before the finish line. I mean, that's a team player. So I get to give Gasly props for that as much as he loathed that decision. I give him props for it.
Yeah, it'd be tough to do. I guess team orders were kind of the name of the game because Mercedes had their own issues with team orders. Not the first time. It's kind of the point where, I mean, I guess I'll just explain again what happened. Like Lewis and George were squabbling, like on the verge of crashing, kind of just racing, I would say. Some of the team put them on opposite strategies, but then Lewis ended up catching up to George and passing him. And then George, well, he was trying to pass him, and then they wanted to basically employ the same strategy that Sainz had with the RS last week. So they let Lewis through and tried to keep George within a second, unless I'm explaining that horribly. But I think everyone gets the point of what I'm trying to say. Anyways, it didn't really work out for George in the sense that Sainz was able to pass him, and he wanted to wait until the last lap to let Lewis through. Again, who knows if he would actually do that coming down the last lap. But that was sort of the main gist of the issue. I mean, there was some slightly contentious driving between the two, but nothing too crazy. But I guess just quickly, I'll read George's radio transcript. Is a little bit funny. You actually sent me this. So Hamilton catches Russell, and then 2 seconds later, they come on Russell's radio. His guy's name is Marcus. Says, we'll invert positions. Russell says, repeat. Marcus, okay, we'll invert positions. We'll invert positions. And Russell says, why can't we invert on the last lap? He just keeps the DRS, just like last week. Let's keep fighting for a bigger result. Marcus says, so it's an instruction, George. George says, yeah, copy. I'll do it on the main straight when I have DRS. And then 15 seconds later, he says, he's got new tires. Is he able to overtake me? And then Marcus says, so this is an instruction. We will invert. And then George just yells, this is all caps, I'm not going to yell, but he just yells, yes, I hear you. And then instantly followed up by, he's not even close to me. And 1 second later, Hamilton passes Russell. So I don't know what was going on with his peripheral vision or his lack of desire to let Lewis through, but it's just kind of funny that it's like 132.55, Russell. He's not even close to me. 132.55, Hamilton passes Russell. Yeah, that was sort of their thing. And I guess leads to the bigger issue is it does seem that George believes he's the number one driver, or at least it's equal. And I guess you kind of have to think that way, but this is exactly why Lewis wanted Bottas to stay at Mercedes, so we could have sort of a Perez-like situation. Yeah, it seems like tensions are boiling a little bit, and if they were in a situation where the car was fighting for a championship and they were costing each other, not only each other, but the team points, this could get pretty spicy. So, I mean, I'm going to take Lewis's side every time, unless it's egregious. But from the bit of an outside perspective, I know you're not the biggest fan of George, but what do you sort of think? Like, do you think George is a little bit overstepping a little bit, or do you think it's equal at this point?
Oh man, I mean, I am kind of right there with you, where I am sort of biased and usually going to side with Lewis just because I like Lewis more. Obviously, he's Lewis Hamilton. How can you not? I don't hate George Russell, especially off track, but I don't know. I mean, they were in a extremely similar position to Singapore. Obviously not as far at the front, but as far as where their two cars were, and he, is just trying to. I don't know if he's like. I feel like he was trying to get a little bit of redemption for Singapore. He's like, oh no, let's just keep it going, and he'll keep getting DRS off of me. We'll use Sainz trick. He just had this vision of him being like I feel like he's got this like idea in his head where he's like, I want to be making these strategy calls. Like, I want to be like these legends that are making these decisions on their own, and it's working out, and I can pull it off. But he doesn't pull it off ever. And I think it's especially egregious that after he crashed at Singapore and, cost himself a podium and cost himself and the team a lot of points, that he's not, I mean, he wasn't fighting the team orders, but I mean, it took 3 or 4 times telling him, do this. And then he ended up losing the place to Sainz anyway. So I don't know. I made a lot of jokes, especially about Mercedes, abandoning Lewis at the podium and not coming at Singapore. I don't necessarily think that was like a like a team decision. Like, we're not going to go because we want to support George. But I do feel like there's been sort of a vibe where they've been sort of trying to prop up Russell as, the guy that's going to be the guy after Hamilton. And that may be the case, but I don't know if George just needs to, hold his fucking horses. I mean, just chill the fuck out. You're not going to fight Lewis. It's just not going to happen. He just needs to chill out and realize he's not that guy.
Yeah, you're not that guy, pal. Yeah, I think it was just bode well for him
You're not that guy.
to learn for a couple of years, like take a bit of a backseat. Doesn't mean you have to, fall way back in the pack, but just in certain times, just take a bit of a backseat, and then it'll end up benefiting him in the end to have Lewis on his side and get Lewis's help and his actual in-depth mindset, as opposed to if they're rivals, Lewis isn't going to give him anything.
Yeah, and
that's something to watch for the future. I guess
yes.
If we're sorry, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I was just going to say, I feel like, just to add on to the George Russell being a little delusional, if he's really trying to play this team game, then he would have already assumed that Lewis is the first driver, because even if Mercedes will not claim that they have a number one driver, even though they obviously do, he's 8th in the championship right now when Lewis is 3rd. So, and he's tied with McLaren Lando Norris, all these British L's. So, that's what a lot of teams in the past have done, is if they don't have a number one driver, they see sort of where they're at either midway or later in the season, and whoever's ahead, they're going to get priority because they're going to be fighting for either the next spot or the number one spot, or whatever the case may be. For Lewis, it's P2. George, what are you doing? You're fighting for P7, P6 in the championship. I mean, you now need to play the team game, something that he claims to do, and actually fall in line.
Yeah, fair. It's like, I don't know, it's fighting for relevance at this point, I guess. But speaking of L's, Liam Lawson
yes,
is taking
2 L's.
L in next year, so 3 L's right there. He's taking an L with what's happening to him. No seat for next year. He's basically confirmed it. What does he do?
Yeah,
he's going to get a seat eventually. What is he going to do?
So yeah, he's confirmed by AlphaTauri as being the reserve driver for Red Bull and AlphaTauri. And this isn't confirmed, but sort of some inside sources are saying that he has signed like a tentative contract for 2025, guaranteeing him either a seat at Red Bull Racing or AlphaTauri. So it's sort of just buying time, because, I mean, obviously he's a very desired talent in Formula One. And Christian said in the media that he wasn't necessarily sure if Williams would be willing to take him for just 1 year, because I guess that's all they're willing to lend him for. So I think it all points to him having a pretty major drive in 2025. It'll likely be AlphaTauri, but they could have plans for him to eventually drive in the Red Bull, maybe once Max is gone, or once maybe Daniel Ricciardo is gone. If he eventually goes back to Red Bull, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he made a mistake deciding to wait another year and get that AlphaTauri probably seat in 2025, or do you think he should have tried to find another team?
I think he's probably making the right decision. I mean, we don't really know, I guess, as much as they know. If he's been promised a Red Bull seat in 2025, then 100% it's worth it. And even AlphaTauri, if they are really going to move to a Red Bull clone, basically like a Red Bull junior team again, then it might be worth the wait, because if you get in if you get in and on a failing team, you could be out in a year or two if you're deemed not to be driving well. So I think it's probably for the best in the long run. It's tough to see. But I guess you run the risk if he went to Williams, he'd run the risk of being kind of a Nyck DeVries, because he's like last year Nyck DeVries was kind of like the hot prospect after that one race. Obviously Liam Lawson's put in a little bit more, but we saw what can happen if you don't go to the right team, or if you're not in a good car and you don't put in the results, you can be gone real quick. So yeah, I guess I think in the long run it's probably worth the wait. I don't really know what he's going to do next year. He's going to be a reserve driver. I don't know if he'll drive part-time in Super Formula or something, but I guess while we're on the topic of Nyck DeVries, he is back in Formula E. We just saw that he's going to Harvard for Harvard Law School, I believe. So I don't know really how he's going to balance the two of those.
So about that, he actually was only in a 3-day Harvard business course. He's not like a actual student there. Yeah, not as impressive.
not as impressive. But hey.
No.
Yeah, whatever. He's going to return to Formula E. I believe he won Formula E. So
yes.
I mean, I guess he's still got the itch to drive. I don't really have too much more on that. Yeah, before I forget, though, I do want to shout out Oscar Piastri for getting his first podium, because that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I don't really have much more on Nyck DeVries. Anything else you want to add on him?
No, yeah, just the Harvard fact I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I originally thought by the post, obviously, that he had decided to start a career as a scholar at Harvard. And I was like, dang, these guys, it makes sense. They got to learn a lot about physics and, engineering for these vehicles and these cars. It's like very impressive. And then it's like, I don't know, it's a 3-day business course that you pay $10,000 to do. Okay, that makes sense. But yes, Oscar Piastri secured his first podium as a rookie, which makes it extra impressive. But McLaren, they didn't do a 1-2, but they did a 2-3. So they had two guys up on the podium, which I know has just got to boost morale, especially when you look at where they were at the start of the season in Bahrain and now in Japan. They've got two guys, both their drivers, up on the podium. I mean, just really, really spectacular for those guys. Both of them, I mean, that was an exhilarating race start. I thought for a split second that there was either going to be contact or one of the McLarens were going to sort of maybe edge out ahead of Max just at the start. But of course, Max is, probably one of the most aggressive drivers on the grid and did not let that happen. But Oscar, I mean, I think he had the potential to start or to potentially get out ahead of Max or get P2, but he got very screwed over at the start and fell back one place in that first corner because Lando just charged at Max. So very exhilarating. But the McLaren F1 Twitter, or X, I'm not calling it that, but some people I guess do, have been posting some sort of cryptic messages. Not cryptic, but I guess like they've just been making a lot of posts about Lando Norris. And
tongue in
a lot
cheek,
of
I believe. Is
yeah, tongue in cheek. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, so I was blanking on the example I
little
used.
Cheeky, if you will.
Yeah, they're being cheeky.
A
They're
bit
posting.
cheeky.
Yeah, so like posting just Lando Norris with his number, and it's like a very like studio marketing photo, and then they immediately followed that up with a clip of Lando and Oscar, doing like the handshake on the podium, and they're just being very tongue in cheek. And a couple of people are saying that it's a possibility that Lando Norris has signed himself a contract extension for 1 to 2 additional years. So he may not be done with McLaren at the end of 2025. He may be there through 2026, 2027, or he may even have secured himself a Max Verstappen level contract in through 2028. That's, of course, all speculation. But with all the rumors and talks of him potentially going to Red Bull in 2026 with the new regulations. I think if that's the case, obviously, then that will nip those rumors in the bud. But of course, it's all speculation, and yeah, we don't know anything.
As always, Adrian, you and we do not know anything.
We don't.
But I don't know. I think, I mean, as a Mercedes fan, they're always, I know this is a different team, but I'm kind of gun shy when it comes to teases on social media, because Mercedes is one to put something out that gets Reddit and Twitter a buzz, and then it just turns out to be nothing, to the point where even they teased like new paint colors on a car and then just been like, we would never do that. Like, well, then why the fuck did you put out that tweet?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think really, I was trying to think, okay, what's the other motive? I mean, they did just get their first double podium, so I don't know. And then Lando Norris did also just become the all-time leading driver points-wise to never have a win. He overtook Nico Hulkenberg for that. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe they just didn't want to type that one out and just put a Lando picture instead. I don't know. I'm not ready to believe that he signed a contract extension. That being said, we don't know anything, so it could pop up. I could look at my phone when we finish recording, and there's a Lando Norris signs 2-year extension to stay in McLaren. I don't know. I just think it'd be a little premature. Their car has looked really good lately, but there's still a couple years till his contract is up, and I think giving himself, the longer he waits, the more leverage he is probably gonna have. So I don't know. We'll see. We will see. But yeah, I'm gonna quickly talk about Sergio Perez. And now I'm going to be a little tongue-in-cheek here because it is a bit of a serious topic, but and a topic that all of us suffer from. But Sergio Perez did there was an article in a Dutch paper. I only saw snippets of it, obviously, because I don't speak Dutch, despite being half Dutch, and the page wouldn't translate. So I only saw snippets translated. But basically, there's two parts of it. Sergio Perez is kind of struggling a little bit with his mental health right now. He's going through stuff like he said it's been hard for him to be himself around his family. It's been just really hard struggling against Max Verstappen and the changes to the car that don't really suit the way he drives. Struggling mid-season, not getting past Q1 or Q2 a couple times, crashing. Just it's been tough on his mental health. To that, I mean, I have empathy for him, but also what you're getting into when you drive for Red Bull and you drive with Max Verstappen. And through the first bunch of races when the car was apparently suited to you, it was all sunshine and roses. And then once the car isn't exactly suited to you, when you can kind of tailor it, both cars don't have to be identical. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying he's not going through this, but it's kind of, I don't know. If there's a difference between suffering from mental health and being in a down period mentally. And I think he's more going through a down period mentally because he's going through a down period professionally. I think those two kind of line up. And I'll let you speak on that for a second. But I guess the other thing that he mentioned is, well, his dad mentioned that the car is tailored for Max, and he's doing what Red Bull's paying him to do, which is finish second. We're going to talk about the battle for P2 in a minute, but he also mentioned how winning the Mexican GP, it would be a lifelong dream for him, blah, 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 which we already know. But I guess it kind of, that spurred a thought in my mind, is that more of a positive thought, is that we could be set for an all-time moment in the Mexican Grand Prix this year, because by then Max is going to have the championship long won. They've already have won the constructors. They probably stopped developing the car already, even for next year. So there really is no benefit to Max winning that race. And Checo, if they're 1-2 going into the last lap, and to see if Max lets Checo through, or not necessarily lets him through, but kind of backs off a little bit, that'll be a very interesting thing. And I guess, do you think that would happen? And if Checo does just flat out win at the Mexican Grand Prix this year, do you think there's a chance that he retires after the season to alleviate Red Bull of the contract situation and maybe getting fired going into next year? I know that was a lot, but I can rephrase the questions if you need.
No, I got you. Damn, yeah, that's a lot. I'm thinking I don't think there's any way he would willingly step away in the 2024 season. I think, especially from a Formula One driver, I think he's gonna, if anything, take the break to try to really reset and come back and really fight for the championship, at least at the beginning, because that's sort of the mentality he had at the start of the season. So as far as where he's going to be next year mentally, I don't see him retiring. His father, I love, the memes and the photos of his dad celebrating when he's won or been on the podium. He seems like a really good guy. I don't know any of their history or anything, but it is a little frustrating him making these statements. I mean, it's almost, I don't know. I know Max's family are they've made plenty of social media posts. Max has commented, or Max's mom has commented on Checo's marriage when the Monaco stuff happened.
Yes.
So I just don't understand, I mean, even if it just seems like something you say behind closed doors. I mean, obviously Red Bull want him to get second, because he's not winning,
exactly.
It's not like they're telling him, hey, don't fight Max. They're telling him don't fight Max if Max is trying or close to winning the championship, and if he doesn't have the pace, etc. But there's just a little, that's something
second most of the races.
That was exactly what I was about to say. It's like, yeah, they're paying him to finish second, and he's not doing that. He's finishing 13th and 8th and whatever, or at least qualifying that bad. So I don't know. I think that's a little bit ridiculous, but I do empathize as far as the mental health aspect goes. Even Christian and Max himself will say it's got to be extremely frustrating, and just, you got to be very self-loathing when you're Max's teammate, because he's just pulling out numbers that you cannot possibly hit. And yeah, that has got to be frustrating. But like you said, that comes with the job. So I don't necessarily fully agree, but I hope he's able to recover and actually put up a good performance because I do think that Red Bull are going to keep him in 2024, but I really, really hope that they are planning to put Daniel in the car in 2025. I do think that's what they're planning. Or if Daniel just has a shit season, then we're going to see Yuki or Lawson in there potentially, or Lando. Who knows? Um, Last thing about Checo, as far as the Mexican GP goes, I don't think Max is that type of person to just help
I know.
Sergio win. As much as cool as that would be, and that's the type of person I am. I would want to do that for my teammate. But he is just a cold-blooded savage. So I don't see that happening. And yeah, like you said, by then they're probably not going to still be bringing upgrades to the cars. So it might be a much more even playing field. And Max, I'm sure won't be. I mean, he'll still be trying, but I don't know if he's going to be as on it as. I mean, I don't know. Who am I kidding? He's got it in the bag and he's still crushing these lap times. So I don't know. But speaking of Sergio Perez, as of the Japanese GP, where do you think he ranks as far as the most expensive driver to have for damages?
Damages to the car this year.
Yes.
Uh, I'd say I guess it's out of 21 or 22. There's been 22
I've got
drivers this year
20.
because
Yes.
DeVries and Lawson. But anyways, let's say out of 20. I'm gonna say between 4 and 8.
He's third. So you're
Ooh.
close. He has cost
Give him too much credit.
2.45, so $2,459,000 in damages. So he is the third most expensive driver to have. I thought it might be cool to kind of highlight a couple of drivers and how expensive they've been just to clean up after. And how much an F1 car is and how much certain parts cost. I'm sure you can guess who our number one most
Logan
expensive
Sargent.
driver is. Yes, he has cost poor Williams 3.9 million, which is over 1.3 million more than number two. Do you want to guess who number two is in between Sargent and Perez?
Magnussen?
Lance Stroll.
Ooh.
Yes.
Damn. Okay.
Believe it or not, Kevin Magnussen is actually 14th. So he's done less than $1 million in damages. He's right by Nico. So they've been pretty consistent. Then we've got Pierre after Checo, then Alex Albon. He's done 1.8. So he's not clean either. He's putting up results, but it's not free.
What's it at the other end? Who's done? Has anyone done 0?
No, but you're gonna love this. So Max Verstappen is actually the bottom 5 make a lot of sense. So Max has caused the least amount of damages, 220,000, which is like nothing. That means that is so clean. Then you've got Fernando Alonso with 350,000. Then Lewis, 525. Then his old teammate Valtteri. Then Lando. Then George. Then we've got the Haas boys. So you've got both Ferrari boys nestled in at 7 and 8, but Logan and Oscar are both in the top 6. So yeah, that's two rookies are very, very expensive. So Oscar, he's done exceptional this year, but he has cost McLaren $1.6 million. So just thought that was a little interesting to go through and see which drivers have, crashed the most and caused the most damage. A couple of pricing. It straight up just shows the pricing for certain car parts. I think I had given this number in a previous episode, and I was a little off. I think I over-exaggerated it slightly. Do you want to guess how much a front wing is for a Formula One car?
$250,000.
That was what I originally said, and it's actually $125,000, which is still insane. That's in the South where I'm from, well, unfortunately nowadays that's a very, very, very small house, but it's a house. Inflation.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that was a decent house, a front wing. So the the front suspension is also 125,000, the rear suspension 100,000. The secondary chassis that they have costs 275,000. And just something like to think about when you're watching like a Formula One race, when you've got a driver that pulls over and you hear Crofty or Brundle go, "Oh, that's a gearbox issue. That's a gearbox." Just think to yourself, "Oh, that's costing Ferrari $500,000 right there." So I think that's a little bit interesting. Obviously, I feel like it's very well known how expensive this sport is, but getting to actually quantify those numbers and sort of put it in perspective at about how much these cars cost and how much these drivers cost, like
Yeah, no,
Logan
it's
and
crazy.
Lance. Yes.
So, although Ferrari spends about $500 a month on gardening leave, so I mean it's all relative. But
500K.
also, I'm impressed that you've learned how to say the word chassis. I remember when we there was a time early on in the podcast when it was frequently pronounced chassis, and I
Yes.
laughed and I laughed every time. But who's laughing now? Max Verstappen's about to win everything. So, yeah. Speaking of the standings here, let's move on to the standings because
Yes.
I want to boost up Lewis a little bit for a second while I can. Lewis is now quick math, 33 points behind Sergio with 6 races left. So about 5,
Wow.
6 points a race. He could potentially, I mean, decent chance he could catch Max, or sorry, not Max. I wish it was Max. He could catch and pass Perez for second, which would be pretty crazy. Max is at 400 points and Checo's at 223. So that's kind of what we were alluding to with, yeah, he's in second, but is he really? So I guess I have a question for drivers and constructors, but I'll ask the drivers one and then hear your answer and then move on to the constructors one. Um, Alonso is 16 points behind Hamilton. Do you think it's more likely that Hamilton catches Perez or Alonso catches Hamilton?
I definitely think it's more likely that Lewis is going to catch Perez, just because I would rate Fernando just below Lewis as far as like skill goes, but the Aston Martin has just like not been very racy lately. I mean, he finished what, P8? It's just been kind of consistently midfield. We've seen McLaren sort of rise as far as their performance goes, but Aston Martin has just completely fallen, and Lance and his crashes are definitely not helping that.
No, certainly not. He's another interesting one that we'll discuss more during the off season. But
Oh,
yeah, on the
yes.
constructors side of things, I would agree with that Lewis is more likely to catch Sergio, but shocker that I think that. Ferrari is so Mercedes is second place in the constructors. Ferrari is 20 points behind them. So a nice little battle for second, the final
Yes.
races. And then a little further back, with 60 points back, is Aston Martin at 221. And then McLaren is about 50 points behind. McLaren's about 50 points behind Aston Martin. Um, is it?
Interesting.
Do we think McLaren is gonna like? It would have been unfathomable, even at the summer break, like unfathomable for McLaren to even be beating Aston Martin in a race. Do you think it's possible that they finish ahead of them in the standings this overall? They're only 50 points back.
Yeah, like you said, if you had told me that would have happened at the start of the season, I would not have believed you. I do think it's possible. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Alonso has he's sort of been the max of that team. He has single-handedly carried that whole team to any sort of, decent standing this year. So I do see if McLaren had two more races like this past weekend, they would catch them. So I don't see Lance really pulling out any more strong performances. If I'm being honest, he didn't look great in Japan, and the car just doesn't seem great. And I know Fernando, it's just, it sucks. I feel so bad for Fernando. I feel like he has to be cursed because at the start of the season, they had these massive aspirations, and there was a time where he said there will not be another race where there's not an Aston Martin driver on the podium, and that just really sticks with me. But I do have a very bold prediction. While I'm not guaranteeing myself that this is going to happen, but I think it's possible that McLaren catch Aston Martin, but I think it's even more likely that Ferrari catch Mercedes. I think Lewis is going to be the catalyst to stopping that, but
No chance.
it's close. I mean, Ferrari, they've done it. They've had very close battles with Mercedes the last couple of seasons, and they managed to pull it out. So while I don't know, it's going to be that is definitely obviously the most exciting thing to keep an eye on for the rest of the season is the standing numbers.
It is. And the one good thing about, I guess, being a fan of a team is if Mercedes do finish third instead of second, you can easily spin zone it in your head as, oh, they get more wind tunnel time. Because the worse they finish in the standings, the more amount of wind tunnel and testing time they get in the offseason. So if Lewis finishes second and Mercedes finishes third, that's even more impressive of Lewis. So I mean, if that's the way it goes, I don't really care that much about the constructors. I feel like everyone roots more for their driver, unless you're on the team, than the constructors. Even like 2021, I don't give a fuck that Mercedes won the constructors. I just care about
the drivers' championship. Yeah.
But yeah, that's my thought on that. But yeah, moving on.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I don't know. I think Ferrari are famous for, choking, especially when something really, really matters to them. But yeah, there's definitely an upside, if that is the case. But George would have to if Lewis was to get P2 from Checo and Mercedes was to lose P2 and the constructors to Ferrari, that would take a serious bottling from George for that to happen. So I don't think we're going to see both of those two things happen. I think it's going to be one or the other. And if I had to pick between Ferrari getting P2 in the championship or Lewis passing Checo, I'm going to pick Lewis passing Checo, only because I feel like that's going to be the only that's what it would take for me to be like, okay, they might replace him next year. If he keeps P2 in the championship, because that's what, if you pay attention in the interviews in the media, that is what especially Christian says to defend Checo all the time. He's securing, like, he can do no better. He's not going to beat Max. He can do no better than P2. While he's having his struggles, he's still holding that position. So if he were to fall, that's going to be really, really fun to watch the repercussions from that. But we've been talking a lot about Aston Martin. Oh, yes?
Oh, just one last real quick.
Yes,
remember that's what caused a lot of drama at the end of last year, because Checo ended up finishing 3 points behind Charles Leclerc for second in the standings, and Max kind of screwed him over in the last race there. So
that was what
I've seen before. We could see it again. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're absolutely right. I mean, gosh, yeah, that would not look good for him to lose it to Leclerc and then lose it to Lewis. But yes, Aston Martin had the Formula W driver, Jessica Hawkins. Yes, had to make sure I pronounced that right. Jessica Hawkins. It's not even a hard name. Drive a test for their their Formula One car. I believe she drove the 2022 spec car because obviously they can't do tests on the current model. But an interesting fact is that she is the first female to drive a Formula One car in a test since 2018, which I think is a bit sad, especially with all these, efforts to be more diverse, females or women in racing. I think that's a little bit of a sad statistic. So I hope this is sort of the jump start to where we can see more female racers, because, there's literally no reason for that to not be the case. If you're fast, you're fast. Like, there's literally no other quantifiers to that. Lewis has been a big promoter of that, obviously, because he's been discriminated against. So yeah, sort of any efforts to get rid of that shit is obviously going to be praised and very, very cool. So Aston Martin, honestly, they have the cool, to me, they have whoever runs their TikTok and their social media page out of all the Formula One teams, they've got the best, because they just do really, really awesome cinematography and edits and just really, really great videos. So shout out to the team that's making all the videos, and giving a shout out to Jessica Hawkins as well. So yeah, that's very cool to see.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Jamie Chadwick hasn't had a chance yet, but I'm sure she'll get in an F1 car eventually, because she's kind of like the most promising female driver from what I've seen.
Yes.
Do you know who the one was in 2018 or 2016, whatever you said? Was it Danica or? If you don't have it
Oh
down,
gosh,
okay.
I don't know. I can actually Google that while you're talking about the next topic.
All right, yeah, you do that. So you know what? I'll let you Google that real quick because I just want to send off on this topic. I don't want to have any response from you on this final topic.
Oh, okay.
So just yeah, it's okay. People can just watch you Google for a quick second.
Her name was Tatiana Calderon, and she's a Colombian driver, and she test drove for Sauber,
Sauber.
at the Mexican GP in October 2018. So, yeah, it was
Right.
not Danica, unfortunately.
That's a shame. I used to like Danica now. Yeah, not so much.
I'm prepping
yeah,
myself
any
for
last
whatever this is.
any last thoughts? I mean, I'm not gonna say anything that bad. Just I don't really want to any retort from you on this one. So, any last thoughts before I? No. Okay. So next week in Qatar, as I believe it's properly pronounced, Qatar. Max Verstappen can win his third straight World Drivers' Championship with 3 points for 6th place in the sprint. So we will discuss that next week. But Max Verstappen likely to win his third straight driver's title. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We will be back next week to discuss Qatar. That's not all you're going to get because I don't want to hear Adrian talk about Max Verstappen winning. All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.